Heading into the final sitting week of the year, Labor's primary vote has dropped.
Labor and the Coalition are now 50-50.
Anthony Albanese has got a major challenge on his hands. He's got fires burning on a number of fronts.
Our number one priority is easing cost of living pressures.
There's no doubt the Prime Minister likely would have been hoping for a stronger finish at half-time.
The last sitting weeks of Parliament are always a little chaotic, but the Albanese government is finishing the parliamentary year in a world of political pain. Every pet shop galah will tell you that the government needs to be talking about the cost of living, that punishing interest rate increases and price hikes mean this is the one concern on the minds of voters. But conflict in the Middle East and a range of pressing issues that have to be dealt with keep chewing up the airspace. There was also a High Court decision a couple of weeks ago that pushed politics firmly into Peter Dutton's favourite territory of law and order and border security. A government that is clearly feeling vulnerable responded this morning with more laws on that High Court decision, but some on another decision as well.
This has been a long and highly vexed and highly politicised issue for the Australian Parliament. Peter Dutton created a set of laws that was unconstitutional, and his whole framework was thrown out of the High Court as of a High Court decision earlier this month. It is now for Labor to clean up his mess, and we're going to start that work today in the Parliament.
Today we are introducing a bill that will make tough laws even tougher.
Late this afternoon, the opposition voted with the Greens against some of the new laws. The government says it will now review its plans after the High Court hands down the reasons for its decision tomorrow. Home Affairs Minister Clare ONeal mentioned Peter Dutton, and not in a good way, at least 7 times at this morning's press conference, putting the blame on his tenure in her portfolio for many of the current problems, as she announced $255 million extra spending to monitor the now 138 people the government has had to release. Another key figure in that portfolio is Michael Pezzullo, a Mandarin who has been a central figure in the national security firmament for more than a decade. Pezzullo was officially sacked today as Secretary of ONeal's department. He had been found to have breached the Australian Public Service Code of Conduct after the leak of a series of text message exchanges with lobbyist Scott Briggs. Clare ONeal told Parliament Pezzullo is alleged to have failed to disclose a conflict of interest and failed to maintain confidentiality of sensitive government information, as well as having engaged in disrespectful critiques of ministers and public servants. Border security and law and order may have been consuming the political discussion, but the government has been busy with some big policy dilemmas, particularly an alarming slowdown in investment in renewable energy, which was threatening the government's capacity to reach its target of 82% renewable energy by 2030.
You've got a market that's fully supplied. No one's going to just force in or go and build new stuff, particularly if you can't connect to the grid. And so things were just almost drifting in a way.
Last week, Climate Change and Energy Minister Chris Bowen unveiled a scheme designed to give investors the confidence to fund new generation capacity before old coal-burning generation closes down and reach that 82% renewable energy target in time. It will do this by underwriting the price the investors receive after auctioning off the extra capacity to the most competitive bid.
The government will now step into the market and it will contract with generators to provide more renewable energy and also some battery storage.
The government says the 4-fold expansion in energy output forecast to be generated by the new scheme is equivalent to around half the current national electricity market, which serves Australia's east coast.
This policy announcement, this initiative to add 32 gigawatts of new tenders for firming and renewable energy capacity is a step change in the delivery against the 82% renewables.
Because investors will be bidding to win the rights to generate extra power, the government won't publicly put a cost on the underwriting. But any cost to the taxpayer should only arise if the wholesale price of electricity drops very sharply, below the investor's bidded price.
The power price in Australia is only $40 or $50 a megawatt hour. Now, only 2 years ago, 18 months ago, the price was $300 a megawatt hour. Worst case scenario, power prices drop and sustainably drop another 50%. That would be brilliant for the transformation of our Australian economy. It would absolutely drive lower prices.
But that's not to say there aren't problems ahead, mostly driven by the transmission network needed to move that power around.
It was left to the states, in some cases left to the transmission companies, most of which, certainly in Victoria and New South Wales, are privately owned or operated, but they haven't done it very well. And what they ran into is significant regulatory problems, and they ran into community opposition. People either don't like wind farms or solar farms, or they don't like transmission towers, or they don't like both.
But while the underwriting scheme received a very positive response from big institutional investors and climate groups, if not the federal opposition, other moves by the government in the energy space were not being quite so warmly welcomed. Earlier this year, the government struck a deal known as the Gas Code of Conduct, which will see gas exporters guarantee gas for the domestic market to overcome looming shortages. The Greens don't like gas.
This code requires new gas supply to be supplied to Australia. If they succeed in ripping up the gas code, the gas can still be extracted and sent overseas, Mr Speaker. That's the big genius move by the Greens party, Mr Speaker.
Order.
The Greens' move to disallow the regulations which would set up the Gas Code of Conduct was defeated in the Senate this afternoon when the coalition wouldn't back it. But while the Greens were at odds with the government over gas, they found themselves in firm agreement today on a revamp of the MurrayDarling Basin plan. The current legislation governing the plan is about to expire. It has not delivered anywhere near the water savings it promised. The government was under intense pressure to get a new deal through the Parliament.
We have agreed to a number of significant amendments to the Restoring Our Rivers Bill, which will improve the bill and allow the Greens Party to vote to support the Restoring Our Rivers Bill in the Senate.
This arrangement is a breakthrough to ensure that we can get more water delivered for the environment, secured in legislation, to ensure that the river is there for the future.